The choice that changed everything. The ballroom of the Cross Estate was a palace of glass and gold that night. Crystal chandeliers blazed above marble floors, their light spilling across white tablecloths, polished silver, and wine the color of deep rubies. A string quartet played softly near the balcony, their music blending with the clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of voices. Ethan Cross stood at the center of it all, a tall, commanding man in a tailored black suit. He was the kind of man who never had to raise his voice to be heard. His fortune, his reputation, and his name carried more weight than any shout could. Tonight's event was supposed to be a celebration, a fundraiser for children's hospitals in the city. But for Ethan, it had another purpose. Tonight he would announce to his friends, his business partners, and his board of directors that he was ready to remarry, and he had already chosen the candidates. 3 women, Sophia Lane, Claudia Royce, and Isabel Hart, stood near the center table, all dazzling in designer gowns, perfect makeup, and the kind of confidence that comes from being told you are the most beautiful person in any room you enter. Sophia was in shimmering gold, her hair an intricate cascade of waves. Claudia wore deep emerald, her long legs crossed as she leaned casually against the table. Isabel's gown was a bold crimson, hugging her figure like it was made for her alone. Each of them knew why they were there, and each of them had been told the same thing. Ethan's 8-year-old son Daniel would have the final say. The boy in question sat at the far end of the room, half hidden behind a centerpiece of white roses. His pale blue suit was slightly wrinkled, his dark hair combed neatly, but his eyes wandered between the women and the door to the kitchen. He looked restless, like he'd rather be anywhere else. The moment came, quietly without a formal announcement. Ethan walked over to Daniel, rested a hand on his small shoulder, and spoke clearly enough for the room to hear. "Son, tonight you choose. I want you to look at each of these fine ladies and tell me, who should be your mother?" The room went still. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Conversations ended mid-sentence. The 3 women smiled, their eyes bright but calculating. Daniel shifted in his chair, frowning slightly. He looked at Sophia, then Claudia, then Isabel, and then his gaze slid past them. His eyes stopped at the doorway to the service hall. There stood Amara Johnson. She had just stepped in from the kitchen, still wearing her navy blue housekeeping uniform. A simple silver name tag glinted under the warm lights. Her hands, damp from rinsing cleaning rags, held a small tray of tools for fixing one of the chandeliers. She was not wearing a gown. She had no diamonds, no perfect makeup, but her eyes were kind, and in them Daniel saw something no other woman in the room had ever given him: safety. Daniel stood, his chair scraping loudly against the marble. "I choose Amara." The words were clear, steady, and carried through the silent ballroom like a bell. A murmur rippled through the guests. Glasses clinked as someone set one down too hard. Sophia's smile faltered. Claudia's eyebrows lifted in disbelief. Isabel's lips curved into something closer to a smirk than a smile. Ethan's hand tightened on his son's shoulder. "Daniel," he said slowly, "that's not—" "I want Amara to be my mom," the boy repeated, louder this time. His small finger pointed straight at her. "She's the one." Gasps followed, sharp and almost synchronized. Guests turned to see who this mysterious Amara was. Some whispered, some exchanged knowing looks. Amara herself stood frozen, her dark brown eyes wide, the tray in her hands trembling slightly. "Son," Ethan's voice hardened. "Amara is—" "I know who she is," Daniel interrupted. "She's my family." That word, family, dropped into the room like a stone into still water. It didn't belong here, not in the Cross Estate's ballroom, not when spoken about a maid. Sophia stepped forward first, her voice dripping with disbelief. "She cleans your floors, Daniel. She isn't—" She trailed off, glancing at Ethan, as if seeking permission to go further. Claudia didn't wait. "Sweetheart, your father wants the best for you. A mother should be elegant, refined, not—" Her eyes flicked over Amara's uniform. Isabel, in crimson, smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She came from nothing, Daniel. You can't put someone like that in this family and expect people to treat you with respect." Amara swallowed, her fingers tightening around the tray. She had worked in wealthy homes long enough to know the tone, that mixture of pity and superiority, as if her worth could be measured in the shine of her shoes or the brand on her clothes. But when Isabel said she came from nothing, something inside Amara shifted. Her mother's voice, long gone but never forgotten, echoed in her mind. Your worth isn't given by them, it's made by you. She stepped forward, her voice low but steady. Don't speak about my life like you know it. And don't talk about the people I love that way. The room went still again. A few guests looked away, pretending not to hear, but Sophia let out a sharp, humorless laugh. How noble, she said, her tone making the word sound like an insult. Ethan's jaw tightened. Enough, Daniel, sit down. But Daniel didn't move. His chin lifted stubbornly. No, she's been here for me more than you have. That cut through Ethan like ice. He didn't answer. He simply turned, picked up a glass of water from the table and set it down with more force than necessary. The tension was a living thing in the room now, crawling under skin and making breaths come shorter. Amara glanced at Daniel, then at Ethan, and knew the night was about to turn. And she was right. The day everything broke, the morning after the gala, was cold enough to bite through gloves. A thin frost lay across the garden, glittering in the pale winter sun. The Cross estate, usually humming with quiet efficiency, felt heavy with unspoken words. Ethan had not spoken to Daniel since the night before. Daniel had eaten breakfast with his head down, pushing food around his plate while Amara tried to coax a smile from him. Amara herself felt the weight of last night's scene pressing into her chest. She wasn't embarrassed about Daniel's choice. She was proud of him for speaking from his heart, but she knew what it meant. There would be backlash. In houses like this, kindness could be dangerous. She tried to keep to her routine, cleaning the library and dusting the tall shelves. Daniel wandered in and sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an illustrated atlas. Amara, he said suddenly, do you think my mom would have liked you? She paused, dustcloth in hand, and looked at him. I hope so, she said softly. But more important is that you like me. I do, he said without hesitation. You listen. You don't pretend. Before she could answer, the sound of hooves and wheels clattered from outside. She frowned. The estate didn't normally have visitors in carriages, not anymore. She moved to the window and saw a white carriage, decorative, clearly rented for an event, pulling into the circular drive. The driver, dressed in a dark coat, seemed to be arguing with one of the estate's groundskeepers. Daniel's eyes lit up. Can I see? Daniel, it's probably... But he was already halfway out the library door. Outside, the frost made the driveway slick. The carriage's horses stamped impatiently, their breath misting in the cold air. One of them tossed its head, spoos, oaking at the flutter of a banner tied to the gate. Amara stepped onto the porch just in time to see Daniel near the carriage, peering up at the horses. The driver had his back turned, still arguing. And then it happened. The horse nearest to Daniel reared suddenly, hooves striking the air, its harness tangled with the carriage shaft, and the movement jolted the entire rig forward. The wheels skidded on the ice, the carriage lurching toward the steps where Daniel stood frozen. Daniel! Amara's voice tore through the cold. She didn't think. She ran. Her boots slipped on the frost, but she kept going, heart pounding in her ears. In 2 strides, she was between Daniel and the rolling carriage. She shoved him hard toward the safety of the steps, just as one of the wheels clipped her hip, spinning her sideways. The world tilted. She hit the icy ground, breath knocked from her lungs. The horse screamed again, the driver finally yanking it to a halt. Daniel scrambled to her side, eyes wide with shock. Amara, are you hurt? She winced but pushed herself upright, ignoring the pain radiating through her side. I'm fine. Are you okay? He nodded shakily, still holding onto her sleeve. Ethan's voice roared across the driveway. What happened here? He strode toward them, his coat flaring behind him. Eyes locked on Daniel first, then on Amara. She saved me, Daniel blurted, pointing at her. The carriage almost hit me and she... Ethan crouched, his hands gripping Daniel's shoulders. You're sure you're not hurt? Daniel shook his head. She's the one who... Ethan stood slowly, looking at Amara. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not the cold distance she'd seen before, but something quieter, heavier. "I'll have the horses removed," he said shortly, then turned to his son. "Inside now. Both of you." That afternoon, the estate buzzed with whispers. Staff members passed along the story in fragments. "Shah." He pushed him away from the carriage. "Could have been killed." He hasn't left her side since. In the kitchen, Amara sat with a mug of tea pressed to her hands, trying to ignore the ache in her hip. Daniel sat across from her, building a crooked tower out of sugar cubes. Ethan entered without warning, closing the door behind him. "I spoke to the driver," he began. "He says you nearly got yourself crushed." Amara looked up, her tone steady. It wasn't a choice. He was in danger. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan exhaled slowly. "I don't like being wrong, Amara, but I was wrong last night." She held his gaze, waiting. "You're important to him," he admitted. "More than I realized. I'll make sure you're protected here, not just as staff." She studied his face for a long moment before answering. "Protection is good, Mr. Cross, but respect is better. For him and for me." His jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "Then we'll start with that." From the corner of her eye, Amara saw Daniel's small smile. She didn't return it, not yet, but the ice in her chest began to crack just a little. Whispers in the marble halls. For the next week, the Cross estate seemed warmer, though winter's grip still held the city outside. Daniel trailed Amara through the house like a shadow, eager to help with even the smallest tasks. Folding laundry, watering plants, carrying books from the library. Ethan allowed it, though his watchful gaze followed them both. It might have been the beginning of peace. It wasn't. The first crack came from the outside, not in the form of gossip columns or social media posts, but from inside Ethan's own circle. One cold Tuesday afternoon, Amara was dusting the long hallway near the east wing when she overheard voices drifting from the study. The heavy oak door was half open and the marble floors carried sound. "She's not one of us, Ethan." The voice belonged to Graham Foster, Ethan's longtime legal advisor and dinner guest at least twice a month. "I'm not questioning her character, but..." People talk. Investors notice. You're building a brand around refinement and exclusivity, and you're letting an employee, a maid, stand in the center of it. Ethan's reply was low but firm. "She saved my son's life, Graham." "That's admirable," Graham said, "but it doesn't erase perception. In business, perception is reality." There was a pause, then a second voice. Clarissa Shaw, a board member known for her razor-edged charm. "He's right, Ethan. Already some of our partners are asking questions. They want to know if this is a publicity stunt, or worse, a lapse in judgment. Your competitors will pounce if they sense weakness." Amara's hands tightened around the duster's handle. She knew they didn't think she could hear them. She also knew this was only the beginning. That evening, as she walked Daniel to his piano lesson in the music room, she caught sight of Graham and Clarissa in the foyer, speaking to Sophia Lane, one of the women from the gala. Sophia was all polished smiles, leaning in as Graham said something low in her ear. When they noticed Amara, their conversation paused just long enough for Sophia's eyes to slide over her in a way that made it clear she was being measured and found lacking. Daniel noticed too. He frowned and tugged her hand. "They're being mean again," he whispered. She squeezed his fingers gently. "Let's get you to the piano." But inside, a different resolve formed. She could handle cleaning marble floors and polishing silver until her hands ached, but she would not spend her days dodging venom disguised as polite conversation. 2 days later, it was no longer whispers in hallways. Rachel Myers, Ethan's PR director, came to the kitchen carrying her tablet. She set it on the counter in front of Ethan, who had been reviewing paperwork. "You need to see this," Rachel said. On the screen was a blog post from a high society gossip site. "Billionaire Cross blurs lines between staff and family. Has he lost his edge?" The article was full of speculation, that Ethan was distracted, that his judgment was compromised, that his choice to allow a domestic employee close to his son was raising eyebrows in elite circles. There were no direct insults, but the insinuations dripped between the lines like poison. Ethan read it in silence, his jaw flexing. Rachel folded her arms. It's not the worst hit piece I've seen, but it's a shot across the bow. Someone is testing how far they can push this without you hitting back. Ethan's eyes flicked to Amara, who had just stepped into the room with a tray of tea for Daniel. Do you think they'll stop here? He asked Rachel. Rachel shook her head. No, they're feeling you out. And if you stay quiet, they'll take it as permission to go further. That night, Ethan found Amara in the library shelving books Daniel had left scattered after reading. Did you read it? He asked. She glanced at him. The article? Yes. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't be sorry for what other people choose to say. Just be ready for them to keep saying it. He studied her for a long moment. You're not afraid? I've been underestimated my whole life, she said simply. That's not new. What's new is being in a place where my choices affect more than just me. If they come after me, they're also coming after Daniel. That's what worries me. Something in Ethan's expression shifted, the sharp, polished mask slipping just enough to reveal a flicker of genuine concern. We'll handle it, he said. But Amara had a sinking feeling in her stomach, because handling it in Ethan's world, it didn't mean keeping things quiet. It meant a fight. The fight came faster than either of them expected. On Friday morning just before dawn, a black SUV pulled up outside the gates. Inside sat Victor Kane, a rival developer Ethan had crossed more than once in high-stakes deals. Kane didn't come inside. He didn't need to. By midday, a new headline appeared online. From mop to mansion, the maid who caught Ethan Cross's eye. This one had pictures. Paparazzi shots of Amara in her uniform carrying laundry baskets. A zoomed-in image of her holding Daniel's hand near the garden. The tone was nastier this time. Phrases like calculated climb and strategic affection painted her as someone with an agenda. Daniel saw the article before anyone could stop him. He stormed into the sitting room holding Ethan's phone. Why are they saying bad things about Amara? Ethan took the phone from him and set it down. Because some people make money off hurting others. Daniel's hands balled into fists. Then make them stop. Amara knelt in front of him, her voice calm. The truth doesn't stop being true just because someone writes a lie. What matters is that you know who I am. But as she spoke, she caught Ethan's gaze over Daniel's shoulder. His expression said it all. This was no longer just about gossip. It was a deliberate campaign, and he intended to find out who was behind it. The counterstrike. By Saturday morning, Amara had already decided she was done waiting for Ethan's world to handle things. She'd been a target before. She knew what it felt like to keep her head down while others spoke for her, and how easily that could turn into being erased from the story altogether. But Daniel's face when he'd read those lies, that had been the breaking point. This time, she wouldn't just endure. She would act. Ethan found her in the staff office, sitting at the small wooden desk with a laptop open. She was scrolling through a website that looked like a messy crossroads of gossip, photos, and anonymous tips. You're not going to find peace reading that garbage, Ethan said, leaning on the doorway. I'm not looking for peace, Amara replied, her tone steady. I'm looking for patterns. He stepped closer. Patterns? She pointed to the timestamps on the articles. Every one of these pieces about me went live within minutes of a photo being taken, not hours, minutes. That means whoever's feeding them is close enough to watch me in real time. Ethan's brow furrowed. You're saying we have a leak inside the house? I'm saying someone wants you to believe this is a public smear when it's actually being staged right under your nose. They called Rachel Myers into the study. Rachel was skeptical at first, until Amara showed her printouts of the posts, the image metadata she'd quietly pulled from the photos, and the near-perfect match between the photo timestamps and the estate's own security log entries. Rachel whistled low. "You're right. Whoever's taking these pictures isn't sneaking over the wall. They're walking through the front door." Ethan's jaw set. "Then we lock the front door until we know who it is." But Amara shook her head. "No, we keep it open. Make them think they're still safe. And then we catch them." The plan was simple and dangerous. On Sunday afternoon, Ethan staged a photo opportunity in the East Garden. He invited a handful of friends and acquaintances from his social circle, including people who had been at the gala. It was framed as a casual brunch, but the real purpose was bait. Amara played her part flawlessly. She wore a pale cream dress Rachel had picked out, elegant but not flashy, and moved naturally through the group, chatting with guests and laughing at Daniel's jokes. Rachel, meanwhile, monitored a secure feed from the estate's camera system, and in the shadows behind the hedges, Noah, Carter, Ethan's old friend and a cybersecurity expert, waited with a compact camera of his own. It didn't take long. At 1:47 p.m., Amara stepped toward the koi pond with Daniel, pretending to point out the largest fish. A camera shutter clicked. Too close, too sharp. Noah moved silently, circling through the hedges until he spotted the source. A man in a tailored jacket, his phone angled toward Amara. The man's hand twitched toward his pocket when he noticed Noah, but Noah was faster, snapping a photo of the phone screen mid-capture. The image displayed on the phone wasn't a normal camera app. It was a direct upload window for a private cloud server. And in the corner of the screen was the logo of a PR firm known for its work with Victor Kane. By evening, Noah had traced the account to a junior event coordinator, someone who had worked for the Cross family only briefly, but had recently been rehired for special events. His bank account, Noah discovered, had received 3 large deposits from a Cayman Islands account in the past 2 weeks. Rachel put it together. Kane planted him, paid him to feed pictures and context to their gossip partners. It's not just slander, it's espionage. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "And now we have proof." Amara shook her head. "Proof is nothing if we just hand it to the police. Kane will claim it's fake, spin it into another story. If we want to end this, we have to make him bury himself in public." That was how the idea for the charity dinner was born. They would invite the same social circle, and Kane. They'd set up cameras disguised as decor, and they'd create a conversation so tempting, so apparently careless, that Kane's spy would take the bait. The photos and recordings would go straight to Rachel's most trusted media contact, who had no love for Kane and no patience for corporate bullies. Ethan agreed, but he hesitated. "You're putting yourself at the center again. You know he won't hold back if he senses a trap." Amara met, his eyes without flinching. "I'm not doing this because I like the danger. I'm doing it because Daniel's life shouldn't be shaped by Kane's lies." And for the first time since the gala, Ethan didn't just see her as someone under his protection. He saw her as an equal in the fight. By Wednesday, the invitations were sent. The estate's ballroom was prepared with the same glittering perfection as before, but this time the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Amara stood at the top of the grand staircase watching the first guests arrive. Rachel passed her a small earpiece and murmured, "You'll know the moment he bites." Ethan joined her, offering his arm. "Ready?" "Ready." Below, the doors opened again. Victor Kane walked in, smiling like a man who believed the house always wins. He had no idea the game had changed. The trap snapped shut. The ballroom was a mirror of luxury. Glittering chandeliers, a live jazz quartet, waiters gliding between tables with silver trays. It looked like every other elite charity function in the city, but to Amara it felt like a battlefield dressed in silk. Victor Kane moved through the crowd like he owned it. He greeted old acquaintances, offered handshakes that lingered just a little too long, and dropped compliments so smooth they almost masked the sharpness underneath. Almost. Ethan didn't approach him at first. Instead, he and Amara stayed near the center of the room, surrounded by guests, drawing attention but not making a move. The bait had to look natural. The first step was subtle. Amara accidentally mentioned to one of the more talkative guests that Ethan was planning a major announcement about family matters. She didn't give details, but she made sure the right ears caught it. The right ears belonged to Kane's planted photographer. The man, disguised as an assistant to one of the catering staff, kept pretending to check his phone while angling it toward Amara. Rachel's voice came through Amara's earpiece. Got him. He's sending live again. The second step was bolder. Ethan took Amara's hand and led her into a small side room where a single round table had been set with wine and candles. The door stayed wide open, a clear invitation for speculation. Kane noticed. He excused himself from a conversation and drifted closer, casual as a cat. His photographer followed at a discreet distance. Inside the side room, Ethan poured wine for them both. His voice was low, but it carried just enough for Kane to hear from the doorway. After tonight, Ethan said, no one will question you being here. Not as staff, not as an outsider. You'll be family in every way. Amara kept her expression soft, almost shy. Are you sure they'll accept it? I don't care if they accept it, Ethan replied, lifting his glass. I care if you do. It was a perfect soundbite, intimate, definitive, and ripe for gossip. Kane's man snapped a burst of photos. That's when Rachel's signal came. We've got his phone. Noah's in. Here was the part Kane couldn't anticipate. Noah Carter wasn't just monitoring the estate's cameras. He was running a live intercept on the photographer's uploads. As the images left the phone, they were rerouted to Noah's laptop and time-stamped, showing exactly where and when they were taken. And in the background of every single shot was Victor Kane himself, lingering close enough to make his involvement obvious to anyone with eyes. Rachel's contact at City Ledger, the most respected investigative outlet in the city, was already waiting for the files. By the time Kane's man finished covering the event, the Ledger had everything. The photos, the timestamps, the connection to Kane's PR firm, and the Cayman Islands payment trail Noah had uncovered earlier. The final step came when Ethan finally approached Kane near the main bar. Victor, Ethan said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Kane smirked. I always do. That's good, Ethan replied. Because tomorrow morning, you'll be on the front page of the Ledger. I thought I'd give you the courtesy of hearing it from me. Kane's smirk faltered. What are you talking about? Ethan stepped closer, his tone still calm. They have the photos, they have the payments, and they have your man caught in the act tonight. You can deny it if you like, but the evidence speaks louder than you ever could. Guests nearby turned subtly to listen. The murmur in the room thickened. Kane's eyes flicked around, calculating exits, allies, escape routes. He found none. The next morning, the Ledger ran the headline. Exclusive. Developer Victor Kane linked to coordinated smear campaign against cross-estate staff member. The article didn't just detail Kane's involvement, it dismantled his credibility piece by piece. Quotes from anonymous insiders painted him as manipulative and reckless. Financial records tied him to shady offshore transfers. The photographs from the charity dinner sealed it. By noon, Kane's phone was buzzing with calls he didn't want to take. Board members were cutting ties. Projects were stalling. His carefully cultivated image was cracking like thin glass under too much weight. That evening, Ethan found Amara in the greenhouse watering Daniel's favorite orange tree. It's done, he said simply. She set the watering can down. Is it? Men like him don't just vanish. Ethan studied her for a moment. No, but now he's the one defending himself, and you can stop defending who you are. Or a long moment. Amara didn't answer. Then she smiled faintly. That's the first thing you've said tonight that I believe. From the doorway, Daniel called, Amara, Dad, come see, the tree has a blossom. And for a few minutes they forgot about Kane and about battles fought in gilded rooms. For a few minutes they were just a boy, his father, and the woman who had chosen to stand and fight. The strike from the shadows. For almost a week after the City Ledger article, the Cross estate felt lighter. The phones rang less, Daniel laughed more, and even the staff, usually careful not to involve themselves in their employer's personal affairs, seemed more relaxed. It was the kind of calm that makes you forget storms always come back. It started on a Thursday morning. Rachel burst into Ethan's study with her phone in hand, her face pale under the glow of the screen. "You need to see this," she said, tossing it onto his desk. A video was playing. It showed Amara walking down a narrow hallway in the estate. She stopped outside a half-open office door, glanced around, and then stepped inside. A few seconds later, she walked out with a thin leather folder in her hand. The footage was grainy, but the implication was clear. She was taking something that didn't belong to her. Ethan frowned. "Where did this come from?" Rachel shook her head. "Posted anonymously, it's already being shared in some of the same channels Kane used for the smear campaign. But this time it's not words, it's visuals, and they're calling it theft of confidential documents." In the kitchen, Amara was making Daniel's breakfast when Ethan walked in holding Rachel's phone. "Do you know what this is?" he asked quietly. She took the phone, watched the clip, and then laughed, short and humorless. "That's from 3 weeks ago. I was delivering those documents to the archives for the estate accountant. The folder is the property inventory list you gave me to file." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "The timing is deliberate. They can't fight the Ledger's article, so they're trying to plant a new story, and if the public buys it, the last fight won't matter." Daniel looked between them, confused. Why would they make a fake story if they already lost? Amara crouched to his level. "Because losing doesn't feel like losing to people like this, Daniel. They have to keep fighting, even if it means making things up." Noah Carter joined them that afternoon. He studied the video frame by frame. "This isn't just pulled from a security camera," Noah said. "Someone altered the footage, slowed certain parts, darkened others, and cut out the parts where you handed the folder to the accountant. Classic manipulation." Rachel crossed her arms. "Can you trace where it was uploaded from?" Noah nodded slowly. "I can try, but if this is Kane, he won't make the same mistake twice. He'll use cutouts, people who don't know who they're really working for." Ethan leaned against the counter. "Then we don't chase him in the dark. We force him into the light again." This time it was Amara who proposed the plan. "Do another event," she said, "but not a gala. Something open to the public, where there's no way to spin who I am or why I'm there." Ethan frowned. "That's risky. If he sends someone to confront you, it'll be in front of strangers, not allies." "That's exactly why it'll work," Amara replied. "He thinks I'm hiding behind you. If he tries to attack me when you're not in the spotlight, we'll catch him proving it's personal, not business." Rachel leaned forward. "She's right. Make it a charity day for the hospital fund. Bring families, kids, media. Let him think it's your guard down. He'll either stay away and lose momentum or show up and show his hand." The Winter Warmth Festival was announced 2 days later. It would be held in the estate gardens with stalls for hot cocoa, crafts, and live music. Daniel loved the idea and insisted on helping set up the kids' activity tent. On the day of the festival, the gardens were alive with color and movement. Children ran between stalls, adults chatted over steaming mugs, and reporters mingled casually. It felt like the safest kind of day. Until Amara saw him. Kane wasn't in a suit this time. He wore a simple dark coat and scarf, moving like a man who didn't want to be noticed but couldn't resist coming close. He stopped near the cocoa stall, speaking briefly to a man with a camera slung low around his neck. Rachel's voice came through the earpiece. "That's not his usual guy, we don't know this one." Amara stepped away from the crowd, pretending to adjust a scarf display. The man with the camera drifted toward her, lifting it just enough to snap a photo as he passed. Then Kane himself approached. "You seem comfortable," he said, his voice low enough not to carry. "I am," Amara replied. "Why wouldn't I be?" His smile was thin, because comfortable people stop watching their backs. She held his gaze. "And people who talk like that usually know they've already lost." Rachel's voice cut in urgently. "Got it. The camera feed is live streaming to the same IP as the last smear, and Kane's standing right in frame." Ethan appeared then, stepping between them. "Enjoying the festival, Victor?" Kane looked past him to see the nearest TV news crew filming the stalls and catching their conversation in the background. The camera operator turned just enough to make Kane freeze. Ethan's tone didn't change. Careful. You might end up in tomorrow's news, and I don't think they'll be kind this time. Kane gave a small, tight smile, but his eyes were colder than the winter air. We'll see. He walked away, the cameraman following. Later that evening, Noah confirmed it. The live feed had been intercepted, traced back to Kane's shell accounts. They had him trying to set up another smear, and this he'd been filmed face-to-face with his target at a public charity event. Rachel summed it up best. He can't spin this without admitting he was there, and once he admits that, everything else falls apart. But Amara wasn't celebrating yet. She knew men like Kane didn't fade quietly. If this was his last chance to hurt them, he would take it. And whatever was coming next would land in the open for everyone to see. The last move, the final blow, didn't come in the shadows. It came under the full glare of cameras on a night when the Cross Estate's gates stood wide open for all the city to see. It was the Children's Hope Awards Gala, a high-profile fundraiser that Ethan had been persuaded to host by the hospital foundation. Politicians, celebrities, donors, and media crews filled the grand hall. Every inch of the place was dressed in silver and white, the chandeliers blazing like captured stars. To anyone watching from the outside, it was just another glittering night of charity. But for Amara, it was the night she'd decided to stop playing defense forever. The warning. At 6:15 p.m., while the first guests were still arriving, Noah appeared in the hallway with his phone in hand. "We've got chatter," he said. One of Kane's people bragged on a private forum about ending her story tonight. No specifics, but they mentioned the stage. Rachel's eyes narrowed. If he tries something while Ethan's speaking, it'll be in front of every major news outlet in the city. Amara's voice was calm. "Then let him." Ethan shook his head. "No, you've already done enough. If he wants me, he can—" "This isn't about you," she interrupted. "It's about me. He's been coming for me since the moment Daniel called me family. If I don't stand there and take this on my terms, it doesn't end." For a long second, Ethan didn't move. Then he nodded. "Then we go together." The setup. By 7:40, the speeches had begun. The stage was framed with white roses and silver drapery, the Cross Estate crest displayed on a tall screen behind it. Ethan had just introduced the hospital's director when Rachel's voice crackled in Amara's earpiece. "He's moving, far left aisle by the second column." Amara's eyes swept the crowd and found him. Kane was in a tailored black suit, his smile thin as a knife's edge. He wasn't heading for Ethan. He was heading for the stage steps. The confrontation. He made his move as the applause faded. Striding up the steps, he took the microphone from its stand before the host could stop him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane said, his voice smooth and mocking, "I'd like to offer a toast to truth and to the courage it takes to face it." The room shifted uneasily. Cameras swung toward him like flowers tracking sunlight. He turned to the crowd, gesturing toward Amara where she stood beside Daniel. "This woman," he began, "has been painted as a saint, but I have proof that she what?" Amara's voice cut clean through his sentence. Every head turned. She was already walking toward the stage, each step steady and deliberate. When she reached him, she took the microphone from his hand without asking. "Go on," she said, holding his gaze. "Tell them." Kane hesitated, just long enough for the silence to thicken. "You've been following me, planting people in my home, editing security footage to make me look like a thief," she said, turning to the crowd. "You've paid strangers to take my picture without my consent. You've lied over and over, hoping it would break me." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Kane tried to speak, but Amara didn't let him. "But here's the truth," she continued, her voice rising just enough to carry. "I'm still here, because the boy you call my employer's son calls me family. And Beckyam, us when he needed me, I was there. Every time. No amount of money can change that." The unraveling. Rachel's plan clicked into place right then. Two projection screens on either side of the hall lit up, not with the cross crest, but with footage Noah had queued up. Kane's planted photographer at the brunch, Kane himself at the Winter Warmth Festival, and payment receipts linked directly to his shell accounts. The room reacted like a struck hive. Gasps, camera shutters, whispered curses. A few guests began filming with their phones. Ethan stepped onto the stage beside Amara, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You wanted the spotlight, Victor. Now you've got it." Kane's composure cracked. "This is manipulation." "No." Noah's voice boomed from the tech booth. "This is every lie you've told, documented and verified. And now it's public record." The fall. The hospital director, a respected figure in the city, stepped forward and took the microphone from Kane. "We will not allow this event to be used for personal attacks. Mr. Kane, I think it's best you leave." Security moved in. Cameras followed every step as Kane was escorted down the stage, his expression tight and pale. By morning, the footage was everywhere, not just the confrontation, but Kane's removal, the documents, and Amara's speech. The hashtags told the story better than any headline. "She stood her ground," #family is chosen, #Kane exposed. Kane's investors cut ties, his projects stalled, his name became shorthand for public self-destruction. The new beginning. A week later, the estate was quieter than it had been in months. In the kitchen, Daniel sat at the table drawing, Amara peeling oranges beside him. "You were brave," Daniel said suddenly. She smiled. "So were you that night at the gala." Ethan entered with 3 mugs of cocoa, setting them down. "The board met this morning. They've agreed to fund the hospital's new children's wing in your name, Amara." She blinked. "Why?" "Because," he said, "you've done more for this family and for this city than any of us realized."